Okay, how's everybody doing? This is going to be a response video to DallasCowboysFan777. He did a video in which he talked about the fact that in his mind Wrestlemania has lost its specialty and it's no longer a great event and that it's overrated in the eyes of many fans. This was actually a response video to Gemini, who stood up for the fact that Wrestlemania is still special to him and it still has all the elements of a great Wrestlemania. And I don't want this video to come off as a carbon copy of what Gemini did, even though this argument is going to be based, a lot of what Gemini's argument is based on, the fact that Wrestlemania is not all about great wrestling matches, which will be the basis of this video as well. But I don't have the exact same points that Gemini made. He did a very heartfelt video, I thought, on how the atmosphere was on the WrestleManias that he has been to, and obviously living where I live, I have never had a chance to go to a WrestleMania, so that's unfortunate for me. But it does mean that I can deliver these points on a different basis than Gemini did, but while also basing this on the premise that WrestleMania is not all about great matches, which I firmly believe it is not all about. For starters, I will say that the best WrestleManias, the ones that are considered to be the best, 17, 19, they had great matches on them. They had more than just one or two great matches, and that is why they are considered to be the best WrestleManias. I completely understand that, and I agree with that. It's just that they are unique among their kind in that WrestleManias have not always produced more than just one or two great matches, and the rest of the show has depended on the atmosphere and the grandeur and the fireworks, the celebrities, all the things that you came out against in your video in which you said that WrestleMania should have more great wrestling on it. Now, I will start off by saying that I am a fan of great wrestling. I like great wrestling. You talk about TNA and Ring of Honor. I'm a huge Ring of Honor fan now. I've been a Ring of Honor fan since October. I've never looked back. Last night I watched Aries versus Richards. I finally got around to watching this. I'm loving this show so far. I'm halfway through it. I have seen Nakajima and Omega, which I thought was an outstanding match. So I am with you on the basis that great wrestling. You should want great wrestling. I want great wrestling. But why do I still watch the WWE? I still watch the WWE because there are certain things that the WWE can do that no other promotion can do, and WrestleMania is undoubtedly one of them. And you talked about how WrestleMania should not be about all those things, the grandeur, the atmosphere, the fireworks, the celebrities, how those shouldn't replace great wrestling. My problem with this is WrestleMania has always been about those things and has always used those things to counter the fact that it has never been a great wrestling show, because there have been numerous WrestleManias where they have had one or two great wrestling matches, and the rest of the show has been dependent on the build-up, the atmosphere, the grandeur, and the overall aura of that WrestleMania produces. And that is not a bad thing in my opinion, because it makes WrestleMania the most long-lasting wrestling franchise, and the reason it is still popular today, and the reason it is still a symbol of the mainstream status that wrestling holds, even though it's not popular anymore. You talked about how you've been a fan since you've lived through WrestleMania 13 to present day, and how you enjoyed every WrestleMania up to WrestleMania 22. Now, I have been a wrestling fan since about July of 2000, so you could easily say that my first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 17, but I did have this on home video prior to this. I got this for a birthday. It might have been in 99 or 2000, I can't remember which year I got it, but this is WrestleMania 14. This is a home video that I got for a birthday, and that is what I count as my first WrestleMania, even though I did not necessarily live through it. And the WrestleManias ranging from 13 up to 21 that you enjoyed, there are several WrestleManias in that batch that did not depend on great wrestling to be entertaining. They depended on the grandeur, the atmosphere, the celebrities, the pyro, and all of that stuff. They depended on that to salvage the fact that there was not great wrestling going on. And let's look at these WrestleManias, shall we? Let's look at WrestleMania 13, the first one on your living through WrestleManias list. WrestleMania 13 had one good match on it. It had one good match on it. It had one great match. There were a few other things that were good to okay, but there was one great match in it, and that was of course Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was a great match. But why then would that WrestleMania be considered a entertaining show? You know, I could look back at WrestleMania now, that WrestleMania, 13 years after it happened, I could look back on that and say, oh, it has one good match, it's a shitty WrestleMania, this is not WrestleMania worthy. But I would not say that. I would never say something like that, because I do not believe that you can do WrestleMania justice by just looking at the fact that it had one great match on it, or it had several great matches on it, because you need to be absorbed in the build-up, you need to be absorbed in the grandeur and the atmosphere of the show, to really say that it is an entertaining show. I'm sure that WrestleMania 13 in your youth was an entertaining show for that reason, because even though it had one great match, it had good build-up, it had a good atmosphere, it had all the things that WrestleMania depends on to be entertaining. Let's go on. You know, WrestleMania 14, I have no problem with that. I love that WrestleMania. It has more than just one great match. It has Undertaker Kane, it has Austin versus Michaels. It has a few other good matches that make it, I'm sure, a good wrestling show, as opposed to just depending on the WrestleMania factors. But let's move on to WrestleMania 15. WrestleMania 15 is considered to be a horrible show. Some people have claimed it to be a horrible show. I would not call it a horrible show, even though it did have just one great wrestling match on it, and that was Stone Cold versus The Rock. If you're looking at just the wrestling, the rest of the card looks shit. But I'm sure that in your youth you were very entertained by this WrestleMania, because it had the atmosphere, it had the great build-up. It was sold on the appeal of Austin versus Rock, which delivered in the main event, which salvaged the fact that this WrestleMania had a very bad undercard. You know, it depended on the atmosphere. It depended on the atmosphere and the grandeur and the pyro, the fireworks, and all that stuff to be an entertaining WrestleMania. You know, I would not call WrestleMania 13 or 15 bad WrestleManias, bad pay-per-views, for that reason, because I believe you have to look at the atmosphere and the grandeur and the whole thing of it. I mean, like, I could talk the same thing about WrestleMania 16, because it only had two great wrestling matches on it. You know, it had the triple threat 2 out of 3 falls match between Angle, Jericho, and Angle, and it had the triangle ladder match with Edge, Christian, the Hardys, the Dudleys. It had all of that. But as a wrestling show, you know, it only had those 2 great matches, and then the rest of the card was salvaged by the WrestleMania atmosphere and the build-up and all of that. But those are WrestleManias that I did not live through, so I'm going in over my head a little bit by talking about those. Let's move on to a WrestleMania that I did live through. I'm going to talk about WrestleMania 18. You know, WrestleMania 18, it had The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, which was a very you know, atmospheric match, based on the fact that they were the 2 biggest names in wrestling, 2 of the biggest names ever in wrestling, and that was what that WrestleMania was sold on. That is the only reason that anyone would go back to watch WrestleMania 18, because, you know, it had Undertaker versus Flair. That was a good match, and the main event was underwhelming. Although not a bad match, it was definitely underwhelming. You know, but I was thoroughly entertained by that WrestleMania from beginning to end, because of the atmosphere, because of the build-up, and because of all those things that went into it. And I'm sure you cannot defend these WrestleManias based on their match quality alone. They did depend on the atmosphere and the grandeur and the fireworks and all that. So I can't really see where you're coming from when you say that WrestleMania has become too dependent on those things, when in my opinion, it has always been dependent on those things. My final word on this. You know, I will freely say that the atmosphere as a young adult is not as there for me as it used to be, but that's a natural thing. You know, as a child, everything will be naturally bigger to you. That's just a natural progression. It has to be expected. Despite that, though, I would still say that I am excited about WrestleMania every year. I still think that the atmosphere and the aura of the show does add an extra layer of entertainment that will salvage the fact that it is not the best wrestling show of the year. And you have to stop thinking of WrestleMania as the greatest wrestling show, in my opinion. You have to look at it as an entertainment spectacle, and if that is not for you anymore, then that's your opinion. But to me, WrestleMania is still entertaining. It does still rely on the factors that are entertaining to the audience, and will not always depend on great wrestling matches to be an amazing show. It's not always an amazing show, don't get me wrong, but it still does entertain me. It still does hold a special place for me, and I will still watch it every year. I am still excited about this year's WrestleMania. Look at this year's WrestleMania and say that the card is not stacked with good matches that look good on paper and should deliver. And with that, I'm out. I hope you didn't take any disrespect from this. This is just a response on my interpretation of your argument on WrestleMania. And with that, I'm out. Later.